Okay, so in the last, I don't know how many videos, I think 5 now, we've been talking about Angular, and then the very last video, I kind of introduced TypeScript when I showed an array, but it was strongly typed. We said it was a string array. And that got me to thinking, well, if I'm relearning Angular, some of you guys, and especially myself, I'm no TypeScript expert by any means, but some of you guys might not even know TypeScript, which is one of the prerequisites on the Angular website to learn Angular. They said, I think TypeScript, JavaScript, and HTML. Let me go make sure that's correct. Yeah, Angular's website says these are the prerequisites to have a basic understanding of so you can get involved with Angular, which we never talked about TypeScript. So I'm going to make a few videos here in this Relearning Angular series where we talk about TypeScript, mostly the basics. I don't plan on getting too in depth with anything. Maybe we will. We'll find out. I'm not sure also how many videos this is going to consist of, but we'll just play it by ear, and hopefully you guys benefit from it. So I've been going through this TypeScript tutorial, and if you want to do this on your own as well, go to tutorials point and look up their TypeScript tutorial. But this is where we're going to get a lot of our motivation for these videos. So what is TypeScript? TypeScript is JavaScript and more. So any JavaScript is also TypeScript. JavaScript you can think is a subset of TypeScript, and then there's even more to TypeScript that isn't JavaScript. And here's an example of TypeScript. It says we're going to declare this variable named message. It's of type string, and we're giving it a value of hello world. And let's go ahead and throw that in the console for the user to see. And then notice this next line, it says on compiling, it will generate the following JavaScript code. So yes, you take TypeScript, you compile it, and the output of that compilation is JavaScript. The compiler takes your TypeScript, turns it into valid JavaScript. And why do we care about compilation? Well, it says it needs to be run to test that it is valid. JavaScript, your JavaScript can be completely wrong, and you have no way of knowing until that particular piece of JavaScript gets run. But if you compile it ahead of time, you might be aware of some of the bugs before you go ahead and run it. And if you haven't started with my Relearning Angular series, but you're wanting to stick along for this, make sure you have node.js installed, because that's going to be necessary to run some of these examples. So in this video, let's just worry about the basic syntax in TypeScript. We're just going to do something very similar to this. We're going to compile it together, look at the JavaScript, and also create an error when it gets compiled. You can see what that looks like. So I have VS Code open here, brand new folder. I'm going to create a new file and call this test.ts. .ts is a TypeScript file, and let's open that guy up. Hopefully you guys can see this. I will zoom in a bit more. All right, so I'm adding this after the fact, but I realized I missed a crucial step in installing TypeScript. I didn't have to do this because I already installed it with Angular, but if you didn't, you're going to have to run npm install -g TypeScript, and npm you're going to need that node package manager from node.js. And let's just write a couple lines of TypeScript. So to declare a variable, you're going to start with var, and we can name it whatever we want. So I'm going to name this text, and then we give it a colon and declare what kind of type is this. Now this isn't necessary, and we'll see that here in a second, but I'm going to say this is a string, and it's going to say or hold the value hello there. Now you might be wondering, what if we don't declare the type? So what it'll do, if we just say var text2 is equal to hello there, what it'll end up doing is it'll look at what's being assigned to this variable, and depending on what's being assigned, it'll say, oh, this is a string, so text2 is going to be of type string. If this was numeric, like 24, text2 would be a number. And what's nice about VS Code is whenever I hover over this, it actually interprets this and says, even ahead of compiling, it looks at this and says, yeah, text2 is a number. If I hover over text, it is obviously a string because we assigned it. Now, if you don't do either, let's say you just do text3 and you just leave it unassigned, it's just going to be undefined until you give it some kind of value, and that way it'll know, oh, text3 is this type. So if we hover over it, it can be anything. That's why it says any. But let's just stick with text and declaring it as a string and run console.log and pass in text. Okay, and now we can compile it. So to run the compiler, you do tsc, TypeScript compiler, and then pass in the TypeScript file, so test.ts, and we'll hit enter. It'll take a second, and notice in our Explorer here, all of a sudden we have this new test.js, and I mentioned this before, when you compile a TypeScript file, it turns it into valid JavaScript. So if we look at this, it's not going to really be any different, except we're not going to see a valid type because JavaScript doesn't do that. And to run it, we're just going to say node test.js, and here it is. It logged it down in our console. Now let's go back to our TypeScript and let's make this error out. So I declared this as a string, right? And I'm going to give it a numeric value though. I'm going to give it a value of 25. You can see right off the bat, VS Code doesn't like this. It says, hey, type number is not assignable to type string. But let's say we ignore that. We don't see the squiggly red line, and we try to compile it anyway. So I'm going to run this TypeScript compiler again with the TypeScript file. And now we will also get an error when compiling it. So this goes to show that these kind of errors can be snuffed out before it turns into JavaScript, or if you're just using JavaScript purely, you wouldn't be aware of something like this. So to fix it, obviously, we can turn this into a number, and now let's compile it again. And it compiled. Now we'll run the new JavaScript file, and we get 25. So probably a pretty short video, but that's the start of some basics of TypeScript. I'm probably going to have a few more videos. I know I want to talk about like interfaces and at least show arrays and that kind of thing. Stuff you might see in Angular. And yeah, look forward to the next video. Hope to see you there. And as always, thanks for watching.